The foreclosure notice had been staked into the yard since the first week of October, but no one had told Malcolm Hayes it was there. He found out the way he found out most things about the house he used to live in, through a list. His company processed distressed property alerts every Monday morning, an automated feed that scraped county records overnight and delivered them in a tidy spreadsheet by the time Malcolm poured his first cup of coffee. He had started the practice 3 years ago when he bought his first foreclosed property for $62,000 in cash and spent 7 weekends turning it into something worth living in. Now the Monday list covered a dozen counties and sometimes ran to 40 or 50 addresses. The address appeared on a wet Tuesday morning, not a Monday, because the bank had filed the official notice on a Friday, and the county server updated on a delay. Malcolm had been eating oatmeal at the kitchen counter when his phone pinged with the supplemental alert. He picked it up without urgency. He read the street number. He read it again. He set the phone face down on the counter. He finished the oatmeal. Then he picked the phone back up and opened the full filing. The property was listed under the name of Denise Michelle Carter, formerly Hayes, and it showed 3 consecutive missed payments on a refinanced mortgage with a new loan amount that was considerably higher than the one Malcolm had co-signed 7 years ago. He stood in his kitchen for a long time after that. He was not a man who stood still often, but when he did, it was because he was thinking through something with the same careful patience he brought to structural assessments on damaged houses. He needed to know what the situation actually was before he decided what to do about it. He called Jordan's school to confirm the pickup arrangements for Friday, the day Jordan spent with him each week outside the standard custody schedule. Then he called his lawyer. Then he called the county assessor's office. Then he made another cup of coffee and started making calculations on a yellow legal pad. If someone had asked Malcolm Hayes what he was building in those 3 years since the divorce, he would have said stability, not a monument, not a statement. Just the kind of ground that doesn't shift when things get hard. What he did not say was that his company, Hayes Restoration Group, had quietly acquired 31 properties across 3 counties, that had employed 14 people, that it had active contracts with 2 municipal housing programs, that a number of those properties generated monthly rental income that exceeded what Denise earned in a year. He had not said those things because no one had asked, and because the people whose opinions had once mattered to him, Denise, primarily had stopped being people whose opinions he needed to consider. He drove a 2009 pickup truck with a cracked dashboard. He wore Carhartt jackets and work boots. He got grease under his fingernails at least twice a week because he still liked working with his hands, and he believed that a man who forgot how to do the actual work could not properly run a company that did it. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat 3 blocks from Jordan's school, which was exactly where he wanted to be. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We want to know what this story means to you. He had spent the first year after the divorce learning how to be a father on full-time terms. The transition was not smooth. He had known how to fix things, how to plan things, how to execute. He had not known how to tell a 4-year-old that the world was still safe when his own hands were shaking. He had not known how to explain absence in a way that a child could carry without being crushed by it. Jordan figured it out before Malcolm did. The boy had his father's stillness and his father's patience, and a particular quality Malcolm thought of as grace under observation. Jordan noticed everything but rarely reacted in the moment. He filed things away and asked about them later, usually at bedtime, when the apartment was quiet and there was nothing between a question and an honest answer. "Dad, are we poor?" Jordan had asked once in the first year, after Denise had made a comment during a handoff that both of them had pretended not to hear. Malcolm had thought about the question seriously, which Jordan noticed and appreciated. Then he said, "No, son, we're building." Jordan had thought about that. Then he nodded and went to sleep. Malcolm used that framing deliberately, not as consolation but as description. He was building. That was the accurate word. Everything he had done since the divorce, every property assessed, every contract signed, every Sunday afternoon on his knees in a bathroom that needed new tile, was construction. He was not performing poverty or performing wealth. He was building something that would stand. The Friday pickup was at 3:15. Denise had requested the meeting, framed as a conversation about school options for next year. Malcolm had said he would come by the house. He had not mentioned that he already knew about the bank notices. He had not mentioned anything. He arrived at the house he had once shared with Denise on a gray morning 2 weeks before the county auction date. The yard had not been maintained. He noticed this the way a contractor notices things, cataloging damage without emotion. The gutters were pulling from the fascia on the north side. The porch boards were swollen from moisture. The storm door had separated from its frame at the lower hinge and scraped the threshold when it opened. The grass had gone to seed along the fence line. He had replaced those gutters himself in the winter Jordan was born. He had been working from a borrowed ladder in the cold, and Denise had brought him coffee through the window and called him her handyman, and at the time it had felt like an endearment. Jordan came out first before Malcolm had reached the porch. The boy was wearing his school clothes still, a blue sweater and dark jeans, and he crossed the yard to his father with the particular speed of a child who has been waiting longer than he expected. "Dad." Jordan pressed into Malcolm's side, head against his ribs. "Hey." Malcolm put his hand on the back of the boy's head. "You okay? There's a lot of people inside." Malcolm looked at the house. Through the front window he could see movement, figures, more than he had expected. "Let's go in," he said. The inside of the house was worse. Not catastrophically, but in the specific way of a space that has been used past its maintenance. Too many things overlapping, repairs deferred, surfaces dulled. The living room had been rearranged, and there were chairs that didn't belong to the original furniture. Sitting in those chairs were a man in a gray suit Malcolm recognized as a bank representative, a woman with a briefcase who was clearly Denise's attorney, and Chad Whitman, leaning against the wall by the kitchen doorway with his jacket open and his thumbs in his belt loops. Chad was 41, broad-shouldered, with the specific confidence of a man who had never been genuinely wrong about anything in his own memory. He wore Italian shoes that cost more than Malcolm's monthly truck payment. He had been introduced to Malcolm at a custody handoff 6 months ago as Denise's partner, and they had shaken hands in the way that people shake hands when both of them are aware of a history the gesture is designed to paper over. Denise was standing near the window. She was wearing a silk blouse, her hair done the way she did it when she wanted to feel formidable. She looked at Malcolm when he came through the door with Jordan, and something passed across her face that she suppressed quickly. "You came," she said. "You asked me to. I'm glad." She straightened. "We need to talk about Jordan's situation going forward." She had rehearsed this, Malcolm could tell. The chair placement was deliberate, the bank representative there for visual reinforcement, the attorney ready. It was a production, and the intent was clear enough. She wanted Malcolm to understand that the infrastructure of consequence surrounded him, that he was outpowered. "Before we get into school options," Denise said, settling into her chair, "I want to put some things on the record. There are concerns about the living situation Jordan is in during his time with you." "What concerns?" "The apartment is small. There's no yard, the neighborhood. The neighborhood is 2 blocks from his school and 4 blocks from the park where his soccer team practices," Malcolm said. "Jordan can walk to both." Denise's attorney, a trim woman named Felicia, leaned forward. "The concerns is about the overall environment, the long-term trajectory. A child needs stability that includes space," Chad said. He moved off the wall and came to stand behind Denise's chair. "Appropriate space, resources, a father who can actually provide." Jordan's hand found Malcolm's and closed around his 2 middle fingers. Malcolm looked at his son. Jordan was looking at the floor. His shoulders were slightly curved in the way they curved when he was waiting for something unpleasant to pass. Malcolm squeezed the boy's hand once. Then he let go gently and crouched down. "Hey." He waited until Jordan looked at him. "I need you to go wait in the kitchen for a little while. Take your book." Jordan looked at the bank representative, then at Felicia, then at Chad, then back at his father. "Okay," he said. When the kitchen door was partly closed, Malcolm stood and looked at Denise. "Go ahead," he said. She went ahead. She spoke for 9 minutes, which Malcolm counted by the wall clock behind her. She talked about the apartment, the truck, his income, his prospects, his inability to provide Jordan with access to the kind of school system and social environment that would serve a growing boy. She talked about Chad's stability, Chad's connections, Chad's home with its 4 bedrooms and its good address in the kind of district where parents hired tutors and drove their children to violin lessons. She talked about what a child needed to see in the men around him. She talked at one point about the kind of role model a boy without a present mother especially needed. She did not mention the bank notices. She did not mention the foreclosure. She did not mention that the house she was using as her backdrop for this speech about stability was, as of 12 days ago, in the county auction queue. The attorney made notes. The bank representative looked at the table. Chad nodded at intervals with the expression of a man who had won an argument he had not yet made. Malcolm waited until she was finished. Then he said, "Make sure every word you file is true." Denise looked at him. "Excuse me? Whatever you put in front of a judge, make sure every word is true." She studied him for a moment. Then she smiled, a cold and confident smile that meant she thought he was bluffing. "I always do," she said. He looked at the clock. He had been in the house for 14 minutes. He walked to the kitchen door and opened it. Jordan was sitting at the counter with a library book open, pretending to read. He had positioned himself facing the door, which meant he had been watching it. "Ready?" Malcolm said. "Ready." They left together through the front door, across the porch, down the walk where the grass was overtaking the cracks in the concrete. Malcolm did not look back at the house. He had already looked at it carefully enough. He had a lot to do before the auction date. Those weeks are better as understood backward, from the end of them rather than the beginning, because the meaning of what Malcolm did depended on sequence, on understanding not just what he did but how long he had been doing it before anyone noticed. He had started 5 years ago with nothing but a set of tools, a rented van, and 300 hours he had not yet figured out how to fill after the divorce was finalized. His father had been a union electrician for 30 years, a man who said almost nothing that wasn't necessary, and who believed that the most important thing you could build was your reputation for showing ups. When Malcolm was 12, his father had told him, "A house is not built by showing people the blueprint. It's built by laying brick after brick when nobody's watching." He laid a lot of bricks nobody watched. The first property he bought was a 2-bedroom Craftsman in a neighborhood the city had been intending to revitalize for 15 years without significant result. He paid $62,000 cash, spent 11 weekends doing most of the work himself, hired 2 subcontractors for the electrical and the roofing, and put it on the rental market at $950 a month. It rented in 4 days. He put the rental income into the next property. He spent less time on each one as he got better at the assessment, at knowing what was structural and what was cosmetic, at finding the contractors who showed up when they said they would. Jordan spent some of those weekends in the houses with him, not to work, but because Malcolm refused to give up the time, even for the labor. Jordan would sit in whatever room had the best light with a book or a drawing pad while Malcolm worked, and sometimes he would wander over and watch for a while and ask questions about what things were for. Malcolm always answered. He thought the watching was important in itself, the idea of a child seeing that a thing could be broken and made right, that the process required patience and didn't require drama. By the end of year 2, Hayes Restoration Group had 6 properties and a small office above a hardware store. By year 3, there were 14 properties and 2 employees. By the time the county audit spreadsheet pinged Malcolm's phone with the address of his former home, there were 31 properties, staff of 14, and contracts with the city to manage rehabilitation on designated housing blocks. He had not told Denise any of this. She had not asked. The assumption that he was failing had made the question feel unnecessary. He had also not told the media, or his neighbors, or most of his extended family. He drove the same truck. He lived in the same apartment. He bought Jordan's school shoes at the same place he always had. He was building something that could hold the boy when he wasn't there. That was the point of it, not the building itself. He was in the county offices at 9:17 in the morning on a Wednesday, 3 days before the scheduled auction. He had brought his attorney, a woman named Angela Reeves, who had handled 3 of his property purchases and had a specific quality of stillness in difficult rooms that Malcolm considered essential in someone you trusted with consequential paperwork. He had also brought a cashier's check. The purchase was straightforward. The bank's representative recognized the name of the purchasing LLC from prior transactions. The paperwork took 40 minutes. Malcolm signed where Angela pointed. The cashier's check changed hands. At 10:03, the property at the address where his son's bedroom still had his name on the door in painted letters was owned by a company called HRG Properties 2, LLC, which was wholly owned by Hayes Restoration Group, which was owned entirely by Malcolm Arthur Hayes. Angela looked at him after they walked out. "She doesn't know," she said. "It wasn't a question." "No. This afternoon is going to be interesting." "I expect so," he said. He had already arranged to bring Jordan to the house that afternoon. Denise had called to schedule another meeting. There were papers to sign, she said, related to the bank situation, which she was finally acknowledging. She had not specified what those papers were. She had chosen the house because she was still thinking of it as hers. He arrived at 2:45. Jordan was with him because Friday pickups had been moved to Wednesday this week at Jordan's request. And Malcolm had simply not mentioned to Denise that this was happening. Jordan sat in the passenger seat and looked at the house with the expression he used when he was processing something he hadn't decided how to feel about. "Dad," he said. "What's the bank thing Mom talked about?" "I'll explain it after," Malcolm said. "Not yet." Jordan nodded. He was 8 years old, and he had already learned that not yet from his father meant something real was coming, not a deflection. They went inside. Denise was in the living room with Chad and a different attorney, someone Malcolm had not seen before. There was also a new face, a woman from the bank who handled the asset transitions. The atmosphere was different from the first meeting, more subdued, the staging less confident. Denise's silk blouse was the same caliber as before, but her posture was tighter. She greeted Malcolm by looking at the newest attorney and saying, "He's here." Chad was standing again, same position by the kitchen door. He looked at Malcolm with the expression of a man who had agreed to tolerate something. "Shall we get into it?" he said. "Not a question. I'll need Jordan to be somewhere else first," Malcolm said. "He can stay," Denise said. "He's old enough. He doesn't need to be in this room." Malcolm looked at Jordan. "Kitchen." "Okay," Jordan said, and went. Angela stepped forward and placed her briefcase on the coffee table. She was 51 years old, had practiced family and property law for 22 years, and had a gift for speaking in a register that was neither confrontational nor soft. She opened the briefcase and removed a document folder. "We're here because you reached out about the property situation," she said. "So let's address the property situation." Denise's attorney, Felicia, again said, "We're prepared to discuss payment arrangements and the possibility of." "The property was purchased this morning," Angela said. Silence. "What?" Denise said. "The foreclosure auction was scheduled for Friday. The property was purchased through a private sale prior to auction, which the lender has the discretion to facilitate when a qualified buyer presents a clean offer. The sale closed at 10:03 this morning." Denise looked at the bank representative. The woman from the bank looked at her file and then looked at the floor. "That can't," Denise began. "It can," Angela said. "It did." Chad moved. He came to the center of the room, voice raised slightly, the tone of a man who manages things. "Who bought it? What name is on the—" Angela opened the second folder and placed the document on the coffee table. The room went quiet in the way. Rooms go quite quiet when something is understood before anyone has said the understanding aloud. Denise picked up the document. She read the company name. She read the name below it. She looked up at Malcolm. "No," she said. The word came out very small. "I bought it," Malcolm said. She shook her head slowly. "You don't have—" "He does," Angela said. Chad said it was impossible, that Malcolm didn't have access to that kind of capital, that there had to be a co-signer or a loan structure or something. Angela placed a third document on the table, the company's most recent asset summary, a single page. Chad looked at it. He looked at it for a long time without speaking. The bank representative gathered her file and said something about the transfer being processed correctly and having what she needed. She left quickly. The room became smaller when she went. Denise sat down. She sat the way people sit when their legs have made a decision their mind hasn't caught up with. "Why?" she said finally. Malcolm stood in the house that had once been theirs, the house where he had sanded the floors and replaced the storm windows and made breakfast on Sunday mornings before everything became something smaller. He stood very still. "Because Jordan's room is in this house," he said, "and I won't let his stability become a casualty of decisions I didn't make." Denise stared at him. Her eyes were moving through something he couldn't see, some internal revision of a story she had been telling herself. "So you're going to— what? Keep me here? Control me from this?" "No," he said. "You have 30 days to make arrangements. Your room, the guest room, is available during that time if you need it. Chad is not welcome in the house while Jordan is here. Jordan's room stays as it is." Chad said something about property rights and legal overreach and Malcolm not being in a position to make unilateral decisions. Angela looked at him calmly and said, "He is the sole owner of the property. He can set reasonable conditions of occupancy during a transition period. If you'd like to consult an attorney on that point, we can pause." Chad stopped talking. Denise looked at Malcolm once more. Her voice had lost its architecture. "You never told me you were building this," she said. "You never told me." "No," he said. "I never lied about being poor. You just decided a man with grease on his hands couldn't be building anything." The custody hearing came 12 days later. Malcolm sat at the plaintiff's table with Angela and a portfolio that contained 4 years of documented care. School pickups logged, medical appointments, school events attended, homework sessions, weekend activities, vacation days used, and days volunteered. He had not saved those records because he anticipated needing them. He had saved them because he was organized, because his father had told him that the most important things were worth documenting, and because he had never assumed his access to his son was secure. Denise's attorney attempted to reframe the house purchase as a power play, as an attempt to control the narrative and humiliate the mother. Angela dismantled that argument in 2 minutes with documentation. The house had been entering foreclosure due to missed payments, a fact the record showed Denise had attempted to conceal from the court. Malcolm had purchased it through a legal sale at market terms. The documentation of his financial stability, his business holdings, and his consistent record of parental engagement was entered into evidence without drama. The judge, a woman named Marlene Okafor, who had presided over family court for 16 years and had a reputation for asking questions no one expected, looked at the evidence for some time. Then she looked at Denise. "When you filed your initial petition," Judge Okafor said, "you stated that the father's living situation was, and I'm quoting here, not conducive to a child's long-term developmental stability. At that time, were you aware that Mr. Hayes was the founder and sole owner of a company managing 31 properties in this county?" Denise's attorney started to speak. "I'm asking your client," the judge said. Denise looked at her hands. "No," she said. "Were you aware that Mr. Hayes had established a dedicated educational savings fund for your son Jordan that had accumulated?" She checked the document, "significant assets which Mr. Hayes has maintained for the past 3 years. Pause. "No." "Were you aware that the apartment Mr. Hayes resides in is 3 blocks from Jordan's school and 4 blocks from his soccer practice?" Felicia said, "We don't see the relevance." "I see quite a lot of relevance, the judge." She looked at Malcolm. "Mr. Hayes, why did you not disclose these assets in the original custody proceedings?" Malcolm thought about the question. He thought about Jordan in the kitchen with his library book, listening to his mother argue about adequacy. He thought about the letter from his father that he kept in his desk drawer, about what it meant to build for something rather than to impress anyone. "I didn't think my son needed a wealthy father," he said. "I thought he needed a present one. I focused on that first." Judge Okafor was quiet for a moment. Then she made her rulings. Malcolm received primary custody during the school year. Jordan would continue in his current school, which was near his father's home. Denise would have visitation on alternating weekends and agreed school breaks, with a provision for additional time upon mutual agreement. Any modifications to the custody arrangement required a stability review that included Jordan's stated preferences. Chad Whitman was listed as having no standing in decisions regarding Jordan's welfare, education, or medical care. Denise was not stripped of her rights as a mother. That was deliberate. Malcolm had not asked for that, and Angela had not pursued it. What the ruling did was clarify the actual record, replace assumption with documentation, and remove the pretense that one parent had been the only responsible one. Denise sat at her table after the gavel came down and said nothing for a long time. Chad was not in the courtroom. He had not come. The summer that followed was quieter than most. Chad's absence from the house, and eventually from Denise's life entirely, happened in the way that certain departures happen, without announcement, without drama, without the kind of finale that would have made a good story. He had, it turned out, been receiving money from Denise's accounts for a period of time that aligned with the missed mortgage payments. Angela had documented this as part of this discovery process. Chad did not contest it. He simply stopped appearing. Denise moved into a smaller apartment on the east side of town. She took very little from the house, the furniture that was originally hers, a few boxes of clothing, some items from the kitchen. She left the art on the walls that she and Malcolm had bought together, either because she forgot or because she could no longer look at it. Malcolm did not move into the house. He had anticipated this question. Jordan had asked it directly. "Dad, are we going to live there now?" And he had thought carefully about the answer. The house was a property now, not a home. The difference mattered. You could not step backward into the shape of a life that had already become something else. You moved forward, or you spent your energy maintaining the weight of a past that had stopped being useful. He did move Jordan's room, however. He had it repainted in the same colors the boy had chosen when he was 5, kept the shelves they had put up together, added a new desk. He told Jordan that the room was his, that it would always be his, that it was not going anywhere. He converted the garage into a weekend workshop space. He had been turning this idea over for 2 years, a place where men in the neighborhood who worked with their hands could teach their skills to younger men who didn't have anyone to teach them. The first Saturday group was small, 6 men, 4 of whom were fathers, 2 of whom were recently out of custody situations trying to figure out how to rebuild. Malcolm did not run it as a formal program. He ran it the way his father had run the Saturday mornings in the driveway, by answering questions, by being present. Jordan helped sometimes. He was not interested in electrical work, which Malcolm found faintly amusing, but he was interested in the way the whole thing operated, the schedules, the materials, the relationships between one person's skill and another person's need. He had something that looked, to Malcolm's careful eye, like an organizational mind. He liked systems. "Dad," Jordan said one Saturday morning in early fall, sitting on the workbench eating an apple while two men repaired a fence section on the other side of the yard. "Are we rich?" Malcolm considered the question the same way he always considered Jordan's questions, with the seriousness they deserved. "We're responsible," he said. "That's better." Jordan thought about that. Better than what? Better than just having it. Anybody can have something. Knowing what to do with it is the hard part. Jordan ate his apple for a while. Then he said, "Is that what you were doing all those years? Figuring out what to do with it?" "With some of it," Malcolm said. "Mostly I was just working." Denise came for Jordan on a Friday afternoon in September, the first time she had been to the house since it was hers. She parked on the street. She walked to the door and knocked. Malcolm opened it, not because he had been waiting, but because he had been in the front room and heard her. She looked at the house. The porch boards were level now. The gutters were flush with the fascia. The storm door sat square in its frame and opened without a sound. "You fixed it," she said. It needed fixing. She looked at him. She was wearing less now, fewer layers of performance, less architecture to her bearing. She looked tired in a way that was probably honest. "Thank you for keeping his room," she said. "It was never about the house," Malcolm said. "It was about him." Jordan came down the hall at a run, book bag already on, sneakers squeaking on the wood floor. He hugged his mother, and she bent into the hug with her whole body, the kind of hug that people give when they have been reconsidering things. "Ready?" she asked him. "Ready," he said. Malcolm watched them walk to her car. He stood in the doorway of the house where so many things had been decided. By him, by Denise, by time and silence and accumulation, and felt something that was not triumph and not sadness, but was closer to the feeling at the end of a long structural job, when the last piece is set and the work holds. He went back inside. There were still things to do. There always were. There are men who build in silence, not because they have nothing to say, but because what they are building requires all of their attention, and attention is finite, and the work does not pause for speeches. They lay brick after brick on mornings no one photographs, in houses no one admires yet, in the quiet hours after a child is asleep, and the cost of it all is just a number in a notebook that only they can read. They are not performing poverty, and they are not performing wealth. They are building something that can hold. Denise was wrong about Malcolm the way we are often wrong, about people who give us very little to work with. She filled the silence with her own certainty. And what she was certain of was that a man who looked like he was struggling must be struggling. She saw grease on his hands and read it as defeat. She saw a small apartment and read it as limitation. She read the absence of performance as the absence of substance. The thing she missed was the brick. There are 100 ways to be a father. Some of them involve cameras and speeches and the visible accumulation of things. Some of them involve making breakfast, showing up, choosing a school based on proximity rather than prestige, and saying not yet when a child asks a question that deserves a real answer. Malcolm chose the second way not because he was incapable of the first, but because he had looked at the two options and decided which one built something that would last. A man does not become a failure when someone calls him one. He becomes a failure when he believes it. Malcolm Hayes never believed it, not for a single morning in those years. And because he never believed it, he never stopped working. Sand, when the silence finally spoke, in a county office at 10 in the morning, in a courtroom 12 days later, on a porch where gutters now held and boards no longer gave underfoot, it said exactly what it had always been saying, if anyone had been patient enough to listen.